I thought applying permission using a normal middleware directive having user calling the is-admin function will get me through permissions in a single day. Then I realized the same user could be an owner in one organization and could be a guest in another organization. And then the whole model I built for organization permissions then fell apart. So last week, workflows finally clicked. Then I tried to figure out who could touch those workflows. And I found permissions in a multi-tenant system aren't rules. They are questions with 3 levels attached to them. So the flow in TaskForge is this. You have the platform, then you have the organization, workspace, team, project, all following that flow with organization being the top in the hierarchy, followed by the workspace, team, and project. So I had to define roles for the application. So I had at first admin, owner, guest, and manager. But then I realized all of those roles were too much for the application. Like, what does the manager do that the admin can't do? And what is the difference even between an admin and an owner? Then it clicked to me that having that other role, manager, will be useless in this system, because permissions are business rules. They govern how the real business actually works, how a real life organization will work. So cluttering the entire application with different user rules doesn't help it grow. So that's when I decided to narrow it down to just admin, owner, and a member in an organization, with every one of them having a hierarchy of rules as I define in my organization permissions right over here. So a key step in implementing my permissions was that I did not check for which user currently has a permission via the role inside my organization permission. I mean, I did not write the whole code of if user role equals organization, then perform this. Rather, I have the user role. Then with that role, it gives the user a permission, which is right here. Like for example, this can update. So based on the user role, which should be owner, the user can have this permission, can update. So without the role, the user cannot have that permission. So the role is just there to give a permission. The permission does not check on itself if a user is able to access it. It just needs to know that if this is a role, then the user has the permission, and that's just it. So with this, I had to also use an enum to implement the roles, because I wanted to avoid typos in my code. And these enums allow me to write the rules faster and much easier. And I have autocomplete from VS Code to complete the code. So I write less code in no time. What now I needed was a policy. A policy will then implement the permission that I have. So for example, in this organization policy, I have other policies and also other permissions. I also have some team permissions, but we'll use organization policy as an example. So right here, it takes the user and an organization. Then it calls the permission and asks the permission, can the user update this organization? This is where it does it. So return organization permissions can update, passing the current organization which the user is on, then get the role for the user. Then that role will be passing to this function. This is the can update defined on the organization permission. Then if the role turns out to be the owner, it will return true, and the policy will grant the access. If not, the access won't be granted. Blade's own implementation of a policy using the can. So can, you pass in the team, create team. This is the name of the policy, and this is the workspace we are passing in. So with that, it calls this policy or can create team. Okay, that's not written in here. It's, I have a workspace policy for that. There it is. So it calls you can create team policy. Here it is, which takes as parameter the user and the workspace, which I pass them. So with that workspace now, it calls the permission of a user being able to create a team. So with all that said, the real questions within the project weren't really, can a user create a project, can a user create a team, can a user create a task. That was not all what the permissions were after. What we needed to know is, in this organization, can the user perform this action? Can the user create a team in this organization? Because in this organization, the role or the user may be different. Middlewares are not really for checking permissions in your application. Middlewares are for requests. If you're requesting a certain resource in the application, the middleware blocks it if you can access it. Meaning, before you reach the page, the middleware has already stopped you in that request. Now the policy implements the permissions which you have in your organization based on the rules you have defined. Right, you're in the company, you can't access certain resources in that company because you don't have the role, or you're not yet at a higher rank to access those. That is where in my application I have admin and owner. The member cannot do what the admin does because it doesn't have that role. Then with middlewares, middlewares checks if you can even get inside that company. If you are not an employee of that company, you cannot get inside the company. That is where your middleware comes in, stopping it before it even happens. Then the policy just controls what happens within it. You're already an employee, all right. What are the things you can do? What are the things you are limited in doing? And there's more in here: permission constants, the actions pattern. I'll get into those next. So the engineering mistake I had this week was giving the teams roles. So rather than using the roles I had from organization to orchestrate what will happen to the team, then narrow the team roles to just a team leader and a member. I wanted to give owner to a team. As a team has an owner, a person owns a team. Then I wanted to give admin of a team manager. But then I realized all that is just noise. That's not real implementation in a real organization. So within a week, I couldn't tell which role actually had which permission. So the roles in your application should stay few, and the permissions should normally grow, because permissions are business decisions that are just disguised as code. So splitting policies from business logic solved the authorization, but I still had 300-line policy files before I figured out where the logic should live. So that's next.